Thank you for joining us. And thank you especially for joining us at this moment of really our first SLC community reads. And I want to give you just a little bit of a background of how we got to this moment and where we are, and we'll do the introductions. But again, I have to say it's such a pleasure to look across the screen and see, um, as I'm looking at it, seeing our first years, the class of 2024, all the way to, I'm seeing people who graduated in the 60s, and I think even the late 50s. So welcome Sarah Lawrence around the world. Welcome Sarah Lawrence together. And thank you for joining us. So this year, as we brought in the class of 2024, we knew that they were coming to Sarah Lawrence at a very particular moment in our country's history and the world's history, as we deal with the challenges of a global pandemic, and as we also deal with a long overdue racial reckoning, and as we deal with the variety of climate issues we now see playing out on both coasts of the US and around the world. And as we thought about starting this year, since I arrived at the college, we've had a theme every year. We started with democracy and education in my first year, difference and dialogue. Then last year, E Pluribus Unum. And this year we took the theme of justice, as the one that is timely for our moment, but as we also think about the inequities that have been made so starkly apparent by this global pandemic and the way in which communities of color are suffering disproportionately, as we have seen the protests about racism in our country, as we've seen the stark disparities. So as we've taken this theme of justice, we're thinking about justice as racial justice, economic justice, environmental justice, social justice, justice of immigration. And so as we also started the year with these first years, for the first time in ever at Sarah Lawrence, and first time in many years generally, we created a first year reads program. So all of the class of 2024 joined together to read Imbolo Mbue's Behold the Dreamers. And then they met in small groups with faculty online before coming to campus, before starting the year. And we were especially pleased that we could be joined by Imbolo Mbue tonight to kick off our thing of justice and to bring all of you into the start of this academic year, of the 2021 academic year. We also, for those of you who have not been at the college or keeping up fully, for our first years, we also have introduced a new 6-week project, Belonging at SLC. And Fatia Touré, who I'll introduce in just a moment, our Vice President for Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion, is really the person behind both first year reads and Belonging. So I want to give her a big shout out as she is beginning her second year at the college. Carolyn Farrell will be introduced, we'll be in conversation, and then we'll take your questions. So those again can go to Cheryl in the chat. And we would ask, if we were on campus together, one of the things I would say is we're delighted to have all of you with us, but Sarah Lawrence is first and foremost a place that's about our students and about lifelong learning. So we always want to make sure we get student questions from our students. So members of the class of 2024, especially, but also 20, 21, 22, 23, if you could put your class year by your name when you submit your question, that way we'll know they're student questions and we can make sure that those get foregrounded in the conversation. And so with that, I'm delighted to hand over for introductions to Fatia Touré. As I mentioned, Fatia is our Vice President for Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion, and also a Special Assistant to the President. She joined us last October, and in the not quite year that she's been with us, she has already proven herself to be an extraordinary force at Sarah Lawrence, and we are just delighted to have her as part of our community. So thank you again, all of you, for being with us. Thank you for reading with us. Thank you for doing what Sarah Lawrence people do, which is asking questions. I know they'll come. And now, Fatia, I'll hand off to you.
Thank you, Crystal, and thank you all for being here. Thank you all for reading with us. I know I've received so many different emails. I know some of you are joining us with your parents. Some of you are joining us with your friends and your book club. So thank you again to that. I am really honored to introduce both Imbolo Mbue and Carolyn Farrell. And first, I want to start off with Imbolo Mbue, and I just want to thank you so much. We first met, it was a little over 3 years ago where we first met and broke bread and had a lot of long, great conversations. And I'm so delighted that you decided to come back and have this conversation here at Sarah Lawrence. So Imbolo Mbue is the author of the New York Times bestseller, Behold the Dreamers, which is the winner of the Faulkner Award, the Blue Metropolis Words to Change Award, and an Oprah Book Club selection. It was also named a notable book of the year by the Washington Post and the New York Times. The novel, fun fact, has been adapted into an opera in Poland, a stage play in Seattle, and was recently optioned for a movie. And so, those of you in Sarah Lawrence, we have a lot of our film students and faculty here. Just an idea, putting it out there. Behold the Dreamers was informed by Mbolo's experience of being an African immigrant and the experiences of immigrants from around the world who shared their stories with her. Mbolo grew up in Limbe, Cameroon before moving to the US in 1998. She holds a Bachelor in Science from Rutgers University and a Master's from Columbia University, and now lives in New York City. And next, I am so delighted to introduce Carolyn Farrell. Carolyn has been a member of the writing faculty here at Sarah Lawrence since 1996. And she doesn't, look like she's been here over 5 years. You look great, Carolyn. Thank you. And in addition to being a member of the Sarah Lawrence Writing Faculty, Carolyn is an author of the short story collection Don't Erase Me, awarded the Art Seidenbaum Award of the Los Angeles Times Book Prize, the John C. Zacharias Award, and forgive me if I'm mispronouncing any of these awards. They're all great, notable awards. And the Quality Paperback Book for First Fiction. Her stories have been in Best American Short Stories in 2018 and the forthcoming Best American Short Stories of 2020, the Best American Short Stories of the Century, and Children of the Night, just to name a few. Carolyn received her bachelor's in arts from Sarah Lawrence and her master's from City College of New York. Her novel, Dear Miss Metropolitan, will be published June 2021 by Henry Holt, so be on the lookout for that. And please give both of them a warm welcome, put up your fingers and your thumbs up to welcome them, and we'll start the conversation. Just a reminder for those of you who are still joining us, please mute your microphones and submit your questions to Cheryl Cipro in the chat. Thank you.
Great. Thank you so much, Fatia. That was a beautiful introduction, both beautiful introductions. My name is Carolyn Ferrell, and I'm here to have a discussion with my esteemed author colleague, Imbolo Mbue. I'm quite honored to be in this position. I read the book along with the rest of you and loved it. I actually read it a long time ago, and I reread it, and it was a great experience rereading the book. Before we begin, I just want to give a shout out to my mom, Elke Bluth, who's sitting in the audience. Hi, Mom. Thanks for coming. And now let's get started. Imbolo, I know I'd asked if you wouldn't mind reading a little bit from your book to us. Would you like to start us off with that?
Yes, of course. So first of all, thank you, Krista. Thank you, Fatia. Thank you, Carolyn. And hi, Carolyn's mom in the audience. It's such an honor for me to be here. Like Fatia said, we met about 3 years ago, and then I got an email from her asking me to do this. So I am extremely delighted and honored to be here today. So I'm going to start off by reading a scene which takes place quite early in the book. as you might know, if you've read the book, or if you haven't read the book, this is a story about two families in New York City during the financial crisis of 2008, 2009. And early on in the book, Jende Jonga, who is an African immigrant, he gets a job as a chauffeur for Clark Edwards, a Lehman Brothers executive. And one day they're driving in the car, and Jende is talking about his hometown, which is Limbe, which is also my hometown, and how beautiful it is, how wonderful the town is. And so Clark's, this is the conversation that they have after Jende has spoken about how beautiful his hometown is. Why did you come to America if your town is so beautiful? Jende laughed, a brief, uneasy laugh. But sir, he said, America is America. I don't know what that's supposed to mean. Everyone wants to come to America, sir. Everyone. To be in this country, sir. To live in this country. It is the greatest thing in the world, Mr. Edwards. That still doesn't tell me why you're here. Jende thought for a second. He thought about what to say without saying too much. Because my country is no good, sir, he said. It is nothing like America. I stay in my country, I would have become nothing. I would have remained nothing. My son will grow up to be poor like me, just like I was poor like my father. But in America, sir, I can become something. I can even become a respectable man. My son can become a respectable man. And that would never happen in your country? Never, Mr. Edwards. Why? Clark asked, picking up his buzzing phone. Jende waited for him to finish his conversation. A 10-second discussion during which he only said, yes, no, I don't think he should be fired for that. The phone buzzed again, and he told whoever was on the line to call HR and tell them he was going to take care of it. He hung up and asked Jende to continue. Because in my country, sir, Jende said, his voice 10 decibels lower, far less unbound and animated than he had been before he heard that someone was in danger of being fired. For you to become somebody, you have to be born somebody first. You do not come from a family with money, forget it. You do not come from a family with a name, forget it. That is how it is, sir. Someone like me, what can I ever become in a country like Cameroon? I came from nothing, no name, no money. My father is a poor man. Cameroon has nothing. And you think America has something for you? Ah, yes, sir. Very much, sir, he said, his voice escalating once more. America has something for everyone, sir. Look at Obama, sir. Who is his mother? Who is his father? They are not big people in the government. They are not governors or senators. In fact, sir, I hear they are dead. And look at Obama today. The man is a black man with no father or mother trying to be president over a country.
Thank you. That was wonderful. To the audience, I actually suggested that scene. That was one of my favorite scenes in the book, where Jende is in he's driving the limousine. He is so enthusiastic about his home country, and he's just really waxing poetical. And then when he's asked this question, he immediately does a 180 and says, it's not a good country. It's not good for us. There are no opportunities. And I loved that moment. It was funny. It was bittersweet. Yeah. And I wonder, Imbolo, if you could talk a little bit about that scene and what it felt like. Do you feel that you were sometimes in that position as someone coming from the Cameroon, that you had to at once praise it, but also talk about how great America was? But then you're thinking about all the problems with America. I wondered if you could talk about your own experience and what it was like creating this scene in the book.
Right. Yeah, I think I've had that experience quite a bit, because I thought very often in a position where people wanted me to explain why I came here, which is a typical question you get asked as an immigrant. Why did you come here? I came here to go to college. I came here as a teenager to go to college in New Jersey. But the truth is that I also came here not only for college, but also for the opportunities that America affords. But at the same time, Cameroon is a wonderful country. So I I never had this sense of the fact that Cameroon is not a good country and I needed to leave it. I love my country. I loved it, and I would have stayed there if you had opportunities. But I also had a tremendous, opportunity to come to America to go to college here. So I said goodbye to Cameroon. But there is a sense of having to praise America and also having to praise your own country, because even though I've been here at this point I've been here for most of my life, I am still very proudly Cameroonian, but I am also very American in the sense that I think America has very much shaped me. I mean, I became a writer in part because I read many great American writers who influenced my writing. But I never was very comfortable with answering the question of like, which country do you prefer? Because people ask me quite a bit, is it better here? Is it better there? It's not an easy answer. Your home is your home, even if, it's in ashes. I mean, right now, Cameroon is not in very good shape, at least my part of Cameroon, but it is still my home. And I still speak, poetically about how beautiful and wonderful it is, even if, even if I left it.
Right, right. Well, I can so relate to what you're saying. Well, on a different level, I studied for a while in West Germany. When I graduated from Sarah Lawrence, I was on a Fulbright grant in Heidelberg, and it was during the Reagan years. And when I was there, Ronald Reagan had been elected a second time, and the Germans I spoke to all felt sorry for me. And they said, aren't you glad you're in America? Aren't you glad you're in this country now? And it was hard for me to defend America because everyone just, America is, a terrible place now.
Yeah, I remember once I think I was on vacation in Rhode Island, and I met this woman, and she said, "Where are you from?" And I said, "Cameroon." And she said, "Heavens, no! Oh God, no! That's awful." I was like, "Don't do that. It's my country." Like this pity, because I'm from Cameroon, which I guess in some parts right now people probably feel sorry for people who are from America, but it's all relative, right?
Yeah.
But I think that there is. I think what Gender was trying to do in that scene was to say that I love my country. It's a wonderful country. I wouldn't leave, but he had dreams, and his dreams were too big for the place where he came from.
What I thought was so wonderful in that scene also was that Jende he's so focused on his point of view that he even brings Obama into it. We don't think about Obama, whether or not he has a mother or father. We just think about him as a politician, but that's what he brings up. And I thought that was so endearing about his character, was that he's like, he has no father, he has no mother. And I just thought, that those are his values that he's bringing from home. And it was quite endearing.
Right. Well, I mean, for somebody like Gender, Obama was a very, very typical example of, how anybody can be something, right? Because in reality, when Obama was president, he was an orphan, even though he was a grown man, so he wasn't an orphan in the typical sense, but he didn't have a mother and a father who helped him become president, which is fairly common in my part of the world, where, you get to be a certain level because you have, parents who basically help you, get elected. And I think Obama's story gave Gender a lot of hope about his own child, because he said, this man has an African father, and my child has an African father, and my child can become something. And Obama which even, I guess it says a lot about, the space I was in when I was writing this novel, but Obama does feature quite a few times in the novel. And I got asked a lot about that when the book came out in France, and I did quite a few interviews in France, and they said, is this novel, is it because Obama made the American dream seem so accessible or realistic? I think it's just because, Obama's election for the genders of the world gave them a tremendous amount of hope that they too and their children can achieve something in America.
Right, right. And I think that, on that note, that anyone who read this book would know that the American dream takes a real beating here. The American dream is just, it's really exposed as a myth. for everyone, you know, for the wealthy, 1%, for the immigrant population.
Mm.
A dream for even the people who seem successful. It's
Right.
really a myth. It's smoke and mirrors. So,
Right.
yeah, so much for the American dream. But on that note, now I have a list of questions which I've already veered away from, and I'm trying to
Right.
get back to them. I wonder, you know, I I loved your book for its story, but I'm also very interested in your craft and you as a writer. I wonder, you know, you've spoken a lot in interviews about influences, particularly Toni Morrison, and I wondered if you could share a little bit about how you became a writer and what influences, you know, how Toni Morrison influenced you, for example.
Mm-hmm. So I have always been a reader. I love books, even though I didn't grow up in a very literary culture. I had a great opportunity of living in my aunt who had a bookshelf in her house. So at an early age, I was reading Shakespeare. I was reading, you know, Chinua Achebe, the great African writer, and Ngugi wa Thiong'o. And so that was my introduction to literature. But I never, ever thought that I could be a writer because nobody from my town was ever a writer. I mean, it's hard to dream of what you haven't seen, right? So
Yeah.
I never, I never dreamed, and I would never have considered it. I came to America to go to college, and I studied business. And then after that, I went to graduate school and I studied education and psychology. My plan was to get a PhD and become a college professor because I do love the education and I love the college environment. So I thought it would be the most wonderful thing to spend my whole career on campus somewhere. Didn't work out for me. I couldn't get into any PhD program. I actually got into one PhD program, but I ended up getting a corporate job, and then I lost my corporate job. But before all of this happened, after I finished college, I stumbled upon Toni Morrison's Song of Solomon. Now, at that point, I didn't know much about who Toni Morrison was. I was about 21. I believe she had won the Nobel Prize in Literature a few years before, but I'd never read her work. And so I picked up this book called Song of Solomon out of curiosity in a public library in Virginia where I was living. And I read it. And for the first time in my life, I thought, wow, like I would like to see what it feels like to write, because I was just blown away by this book. I had never read anything like it. So I don't know what possessed me, but the moment I finished reading that book, I just started writing. Now, the book that I started writing is not going to come out till next year. So it tells you a lot about what I've been through. So I started writing and had no creative writing background. I've never taken a writing class in my life. I just thought, I'm just going to try and see what it feels like to write. And of course, it was the worst writing ever, you know. So hopefully nobody will ever see that stuff. But I started writing and I found out that I enjoyed it. But I didn't know, you know, what people do with their writing. I never started writing thinking, oh, I'm going to become a published novelist one day. You know, I never, or, you know, write a book that's going to be chosen by Sarah Lawrence, just nothing like that. I started writing just for the joy of it. It was a hobby. But through all these years, I mean, I spent years writing and I, you know, hid it. I didn't share it with anybody. But I kept reading. I read a whole lot more Toni Morrison. I read many other American writers. I started reading the South American writers also, read a lot of Gabriel Garcia Marquez. I read the other American contemporary writers like Jonathan Franzen. You know, I like Junot Diaz, Jhumpa Lahiri. I read a lot of writers I wrote about the immigrant experience. Some of my favorite books were Frank McCourt, the Irish American writer, Angela's Ashes. So I'll say for probably about 9 years, I just wrote on the side, during which time I was trying to become a college professor, and I got a corporate job. My plan was to work at my corporate job and then go and quit the job and get a PhD, and then I'll keep on writing on the side, and who knows what's going to happen to my writing. Well, the financial crisis happened and I lost my corporate job, and then I couldn't get into any PhD program except for one program which admitted me. But at that point, I just was too nervous about moving across the country for a PhD program. So I turned down I turned down the PhD offer. So now I have no job and I have no PhD. And I said to myself, you know, everything else, nothing else seems working out for me career-wise. I couldn't, you know, get this corporate job. I tried to get a new job. I couldn't get a new job. So I just decided to turn to my writing. I said, you know, let me go to one thing that I enjoy, and see what happens to it. And perhaps I can, you know, find a new path with this. But because I'd never studied writing, and because I didn't realize how difficult it is, you know, because when you read books you enjoy, you don't really realize how, I mean, you're a writer, you know how difficult it is, but for most people, you don't realize that it is a craft, and that for you to, you know, to produce, you know, a powerful work the way Toni Morrison does it, you have to be very excellent at your craft. So it took me years of writing and rewriting over and over and over and over to find my voice. Something like dialogue. In this book, people talk about the dialogue a lot. Oh, the dialogue is very sharp. How did you do that? But that was very difficult because I just realized right away that it's very, very hard to capture dialogue in a book that sounds real.
Right.
And so I spend a lot of time studying people, listening to people when I meet them, listening to the nuances or different accents. Or somebody like the character in my novel, Cindy Edwards, you know, how she sounds different from her husband or from her housekeeper, especially living in New York City also. That was a major advantage, because you live in New York City and you meet so many different kinds of peoples and backgrounds and experiences and accents and everything. And because I lived there, I was able to basically become this student of human nature. I looked at people as, you know, as subjects to be studied. I noticed the way they move their fingers, the way they held their head, the colors they wore, everything about people fascinated me. And I think that was sort of my own classroom, you know,
Yeah.
going into New York City and also becoming a better listener because I had to listen to the things people did not say, not just what they said, but what they didn't say. And also, you know, examine myself also, because part of writing this novel was also examining my own self and my own prejudices and the way I judge people, because this was a difficult novel to write, because I had to write about people very different from myself. And in the beginning, it was very hard because I was very judgmental towards some of them, towards their choices, towards their privileges. And I had to basically, you know, get rid of that, because I realized that in writing a story as a storyteller, my point is to tell the story and just that. You know, I just tell the story and leave it up to the reader to decide. So I don't tell people what to think of my stories. People ask me all the time, what is your message? There is no message except the one that you get. I prefer to just tell the story honestly and completely and leave it at that. But that was I mean, I started writing in 2002. This book didn't come out to 2016. So it was a 14-year journey of learning how to write.
Wow, that's amazing. You know, I think it's impossible for writers to put out a book that's worthwhile if we don't care about our own characters. Mm-hmm. You know, we can't really expect other people to care about them.
That's right.
And you have such complex characters in this. You know, the four you know, main characters, if you will, they're all of the characters are so interesting. I was going to ask you, you touched on it a little bit, what it was like to inhabit, mm-hmm. You know, not only a white woman, but what was it like to inhabit a white man? What was it like to inhabit a Jende? What was it like to, and also his wife, you know, I think that she's such a complex character. All of them are complex characters. And, you know, just a word on the idea of a message. You're right. Everybody gets the message that they get. You know, they bring their own baggage to the book and they get they get a message. I think that if you had put out a message and said,
Mm.
this is what you're supposed to understand, the book would not be as successful as it is, you know.
Thank you.
But
Thank you.
I wondered if you could talk a little bit more about what was it like to write from a different point of view, especially in this age where we talk about cultural appropriation and who has the right to write about what.
That's right.
You could talk, you know, you admit that it was hard to write some of these characters. How did you start to feel for them?
It was very hard, and so this is what something I learned about empathy, right? It's very easy to feel empathy towards people who are like you. So when I started writing this novel, I had a tremendous amount of empathy for the African immigrants, because of course they're like me. I know what it's like to come from there. I lived in Harlem like they did. I had my struggle with poverty in America like they did. I had my struggle with racism. I had my struggles with just being an immigrant and pining for home. So I showered them with empathy. But for the white rich people, I did not have much empathy. And I'm not proud to admit that, but I didn't, you know, because why should I, you know, feel bad for you living on Park Avenue with your money and everything? But I had to learn that, but it is possible to have empathy for them. It is possible. And I had to push myself. It wasn't easy. You know, it wasn't easy because, but if you had read this book earlier, you would have seen what I'm talking about, because the people who read it in the early draft, they said, I like Gender and Nanny more. I want to read more about them, but I don't like Clark and Cindy. And it started bothering me when people said that, because I started realizing that as a writer, I was not showing them their full complexity. I was showing the rich side, I was showing the white side, but what about the side of a mother who is trying to hold her family together, or a father who is trying to go to work to make sure that his family has everything? And in spending so much time with them, I came to realize that, you know, as cliche as it sounds, like we are all so much alike. I mean, when you write a novel, you realize how incredibly similar we all are. You know, it took me a long time to come to see that. And that's why, you know, the novel took me 5 years to write, because I had to look at Clark Edwards and not just see a Wall Street executive, not just see a guy who worked on Lehman Brothers, but to see a human being who has hopes, who has dreams. And even though he has achieved the American dream, to see that he worked so hard to achieve the American dream, and then the American dream is sort of failing him, because he achieved it, and yet his life is still falling apart in many ways, which is quite emblematic, which is not an uncommon story in this country. And Cindy Edwards, who is not very easy to like. I mean, she was a tough character. That was by far the toughest character for me, because, you know, she's not very easy to like, but she is a human being. You know, she is a human being. And I'm not sure how to put it to not sound so cliche, but the gift that writing gave me was that it really allowed me to start seeing humans, you know, to look at people and to see, you know, somebody who has struggles that I cannot even understand because I've never had them. Right. And we're talking about justice, right? You know, as a theme. You know, when we think about justice, we tend to think about people who have similar struggles, who want justice for people like ourselves. But this book allowed me to empathize with people who don't even empathize with me, because I can see why they don't empathize with me, and how their blindness is hurting them. Yeah. But it was a sort of, you know, it was sort of walking through the fire for me. I had to go through my own purification. I had to cleanse myself, because I was very prejudiced. I was very prejudiced towards these characters, and this book would not be what it is if I hadn't, you know, said to myself that this is not your job. Is not to tell the story of somebody who is awful or wonderful. Just tell the story of Clark Edwards. Just tell the story of Cindy Edwards. And in the end, even if the book was not the success that it became, I think I would have still been proud of myself, because I went through the process of being honest, with not just with the reader, but with myself also.
Yeah, I think that, thank you for that answer. That was fantastic. I think that the level of emotional honesty in the book is really, is so high, and it's what makes us keep reading.
Mm-hmm.
And, you know, it's interesting, on that note of empathy, you know, we struggle with the Edwards and their various blindnesses, and you
Mm-hmm.
were able to show all these characters in their full dimension. I wondered if you could talk about Nani
Mm-hmm.
also, because you know, she has it. She has this moment where she's recounting what her father has
Mm-hmm.
told her, that, you know, you've got to, you know, give up your dreams.
Mm-hmm.
And she indeed does give up her dreams. And her
Mm-hmm.
husband, whom we have been rooting for all this time, you know, becomes violent towards her. She has no access to her education. The
Mm-hmm.
dean is not helping her. She's
Mm-hmm.
got to give it up. What was that like to write, and specifically with Jende? How
Mm-hmm.
is it like to negotiate that? You know, he is just like the Edwards, a dimensional character. You give him much dimension, and
Mm-hmm.
yet the person who loses the most, I think, is
Mm-hmm.
really Nani. She,
Mm-hmm.
you know, she goes home, and she's kind of sailing into a life that looks a little bit like Cindy Edwards, where
Mm-hmm.
she will be this wealthy woman back
Right.
home.
Right.
Um, but she has given up so much.
Mm-hmm.
What was that like for you, to
Mm-hmm.
create that scenario and to face Jende's own
Mm-hmm.
shortcomings?
Mm. Yeah, I guess it was a release for me in a way, because I know Nani's story through many women. Her story is very typical of women where I come from who had dreams and could never get to achieve their dreams, and also women in America. I mean, I know women who came here and they realized what opportunities there were in America, but because they had husbands, because they had children, they had to sacrifice something, and they had to sacrifice their dreams for their families. And it is you know, it is painful, because I know people like Nani, and I and like you said, she's not a saint either, right? So just because somebody has dreams and works hard doesn't make them wonderful. I mean, this is not a novel about, oh, the wonderful, hardworking, great African immigrants and the awful rich white people. Like, I don't, that doesn't interest me. Right? What interests me is everybody's story. So in this novel, I try to write everybody's story, even though they all interlap. I try to tell Cindy's story and Clark's story and Nanny's story and Jender's story, and Nanny's story even was it was the one that I would say that was closest to me, because I am a woman, I am an African woman, I'm a Black woman. I know how difficult life gets when you fall in those categories, and Nanny has the courage and the determination and everything to transcend that, and yet she, without giving away the ending, she somewhat fails. But it was also, I guess, painful writing about gender also, because I grew up around people like Gender. Gender is a character straight from my hometown, so that was not the hardest character. It was a lot of fun writing him because I knew him, but I also knew people who came to America, and America sort of break them. and America, Gender is somebody who was quite broken by America. And you may not agree with his actions, but there's something to be said about coming to a country with high hopes and believing that you come here, you work hard, and then you find yourself still poor, without papers, facing deportation, not having enough to feed your family. I mean, that stuff gets to you. It really does get to you. And for a man, especially a proud man like Gender, who has done the best he could, and to still be failing because this country is just really not set up for the likes of him, it is devastating, and it's hard to not crumble under the weight of it.
Yeah, I think you showed all of the characters in this book in very nuanced ways, and everyone's story was painful. We felt the pain of all of these characters, and that is really that's really due to your good writing and your
Thank
connection, your own connection to these characters. They all are, as you said, no one is a perfect character. They're all flawed in their own ways, but we have such empathy for these characters. Immigration, big theme in this book. And I thought it was interesting the way immigrants, the difficulties of immigrant populations in New York were portrayed. And I wondered if you could just talk a minute about what you think has changed in the time that this book takes place and now, immigration issues now. What is it like? What would it be like for someone from the Cameroon to come to this country now? Would they still have those big ideals, these dreams of America, or would they look at America and say, next, I'll go instead. What do you think has changed in this time?
Yeah, it is a very different country from the one in which in which the story is set. And it's funny because people say to me, oh, they were going through such a hard time. I didn't realize how hard it is to get papers. And that question doesn't seem to stop to amaze me. And people do not realize how incredibly difficult it is to get papers in America. If it wasn't the case, they wouldn't have 11 million people, waiting in line, finding a way to get papers. So that is the one thing that, has significantly changed. That, as hard as the struggle was back in 2000, the novel is set, 2008, 2009, it is incredibly harder right now to get papers. So somebody in gender in any situation, they had a chance in the novel, but right now they will have even less of a chance. But I think that as far as the immigrant experience, because I lived in New York City for so long, and I love New York City, I thought New York City was a wonderful place for immigrants. I never felt at home in America till I moved to New York City. That was the first time I really felt like, wow, I could make a life in this country when I moved to New York City, because there's something about the place that just opens its arms to everybody and says welcome and find a home here. Of course, it's very, very difficult to live there.
Yes.
As an immigrant, I went through that experience myself, but New York gives you hope that it's possible. Because you can always find a community of people who are like yourself, and you can see in the novel, Gender and Nanny, they have other friends from other African countries, and even if they're not other Cameroonians, they have friends who they can come to them and help them in times of need, and they can watch the children for them. All of those things make a difference when you come here. But the experience of being an immigrant, as far as the struggle it takes to being a newly arrived immigrant to the immigrant that has achieved the American dream, I think it's just gotten a lot more tougher, and I really hope that it takes a turn for the better.
Yes, we all do.
Yes.
Wink, wink. You just on that note, you talked about something that I thought was really interesting, that the issue of shame comes up a lot in the novel. And one aspect that I found particularly interesting was the shame that Jende would feel when he came back home, that he had not done what Winston had done. He had not done what other successful immigrants from Cameroon had done. He failed. And I wonder, if you could talk about that dynamic in Cameroon. What is that like for people who actually do come back? Do people automatically think, well, you're a failure, you're back here? Or are there people, can you talk about people who embrace going back there, or what is that like? I'm just curious.
Well, there is, Carolyn, the thing is that there is a tremendous amount of shame in not achieving the American dream. It is, because the understanding is that America is a lot of opportunity, right? You cannot come here and do the right thing and not succeed. People cannot understand that. They cannot wrap their heads around the fact that there are lots of hurdles to achieving that American dream. So somebody like Jende, if he had gone back home without any money, people would have said, what did you do in America? All that money there, and you came back here with nothing. I mean, I had to deal with a similar situation because when I came to America, the first time I went back home, I borrowed money to go back home so that when I go back home, I wouldn't come across as poor. And by the way, in America, I was like, I barely had enough money to pay my bills. But when I went back home, I was handing out money to taking my friends out to drink, wearing nice clothes, because I couldn't deal with the shame that I still have not made something out of my life in America after so many years. And I don't think it's even just America. I think even once you leave home, right, and you go back, even if it's within America, because I remember I was doing an interview with a gentleman on a radio station, and he said, I'm from the South, and when I moved to New York, and when I go back to the South, I have to put up S that I made it in New York City. You can't go back to the South and say, oh, I went to New York and I'm still poor. You can't do that. So there's this tremendous amount of pressure to achieve the American dream. I mean, I have friends who said to me that your novel really made me feel less ashamed about the fact that after 20 years, I still am poor in America. And my friend said I can't even go back home now because I can't face telling people that over here I'm still working 3 jobs. And it is because we fail to appreciate how hard it is. Yes, people achieve the American dream, but there are many people who do everything right, who do their best, and they still don't achieve it. And I don't really like when people say to me, but well, look at you, you came here and you work hard, and look at you, now you wrote a book. But that is not the point. That is not the point, because there is, while I believe that this country offers tremendous opportunity, there are many times when I came close to giving up and going back home, because I realized that maybe it's just not for me. And I'm glad I stayed. I'm glad I stuck it out. But I have tremendous amount of empathy for my fellow immigrants who came here and worked really hard, and after so many years, decided to just pack up and go back home, or decided to just, accept their lot and say, this country is never going to deliver its promise to me.
Mm-hmm. Wow. Well, thank you for that answer. I'm going to open it up for a second to our audience, but I just had one more question that I want to sneak in under the wire here. I actually have a lot of questions, but I'm just going to sneak one in at the moment. And I wondered if you could talk a little bit about the community of African writers that you have in this country, particularly African women writers. Are you connected? Which African women writers you read, etc.?
Oh yeah, I do. I mean, the good thing about being a writer, at least before COVID, is that you get invited to lots of festivals and many other events, and you get to meet other writers. But I am friends with the writer Wayetu Moore, who had a book that just came out, and because I guess it was a couple of months ago. I am friends with the writer Zadie Smith, who's been really, really wonderful. I mean, it's wonderful to come into a world where, because I had never been published, I was never in the literary world, and you meet other people who not only support you, but also teach you a few things about what it's like to be a published writer, especially as a Black woman. And so there has been, and even the ones that I don't really know, I still read a lot of your book. I am a huge fan of Ya Jesse. I'm a huge fan of Novale Bulawayo. I am incredibly proud of not only the African writers, but women writers in particular, because there was a long time when writing was mostly done by men, at least writing at a certain level. So I am incredibly proud of any woman writer right now, and and of course the male writers also, but women writers, they have a special place in my heart, because I know what is involved, especially for for those of us who had to face a lot of rejection. I mean, my work was rejected for 3 years. I sent it to every other agent in the country over and over, and everybody rejected it, and finally one agent agreed to represent it, and that is how it got published. But I know how hard it is. So whenever I have a chance to read the work of a young African writer or any young female writer who is about to be published, and to endorse it and give a blurb, I am very delighted to take a look at it, because I know how much it means to have a community of people supporting your work.
Oh, that's so generous. Well, I might come knocking on your door.
Please do.
I was so happy to see that Tsitsi Dangaremba was shortlisted for the Booker Prizes here. I mean, that was just so.
I didn't know that. That's wonderful.
Yes, amazing. I mean, I think so many of us grew up on Nervous Conditions and just loved that book. So it's just really such an honor and such an achievement. So happy. So now I'm happy to open up the questions to our audience, and hopefully I am technologically able to do this. Okay. I have a question from Danielle, class of 97, who writes, I'm curious about the use of the Bob Dylan lyrics in chapter 44. You know, are Dylan's words more than just a part of a passing scene, or do they mean something else to you?
I'm so sorry, but actually I've forgotten what the lyrics are. I've forgotten. Is it, is it the answer is blowing in the wind? Is
I
that?
think so.
Oh, yes. Yeah, well, that tells you about where my head was. I don't know, I guess, I'm not sure, because I do love that song. But it seems like the kind of song that somebody will be playing on the subway platform, and it would bring up certain emotions. But I'm not sure. I just thought it was a beautiful song for that particular scene. That was all.
Yeah. Well, I think if someone asked me a question about my chapter 44, I would not remember anything. You're amazing.
You.
I think you're totally amazing. You know, I just want to backtrack a tiny bit. You know, you began to speak about your life when you came here and you were studying business, and then you went to an educational psychology program. And I just think that's so interesting. Did you had clearly a love of reading. Did you ever think about joining an MFA program? Did you have the voices of family saying, doctor, lawyer, business person? What was that like when you were going to school? Were you struggling with those decisions, or did you just assume, okay, I'm going to do these, you know, these professions?
Right. So that is the funny thing, Carolyn, because I didn't even know that there were such things as writing classes when I was in college. You know, so I mean, looking back, I wish, you know, I wish I'd taken advantage of the services on campus where I could have gotten some kind of guidance. That is the one thing that I would encourage, you know, students to do, because if I had met somebody and told them I love to write, they could have, you know, helped me sooner. I could have taken a few classes in creative writing. I could have gone for an MFA instead of, because I applied for an MBA, then I didn't go to business school, then I applied for law school, I didn't go to law school, then I applied. So I really had no really good sense of direction. And I went down many different paths, and I didn't take my writing seriously till I was in my 30s. And I really hope that, you know, I mean, thankfully, you know, a lot of kids are, you know, figuring out what they want soon, at least it seems like it. But I did not even realize that I could take a class, or there was such a thing as an MFA. I had never heard of an MFA. I didn't even know there's such a thing as editors. Never. It was only when I moved to New York City in my late 20s that I met people who said, I want to be a writer. And I said, wow, you can be, that's a thing, you know. I didn't even, because I just read books and I just didn't even think, who are the people behind these books? I mean, Toni Morrison was a name on a book, but I didn't even put it together with the person. It was only when I moved to New York City that, you know, she was doing a reading in Central Park, and I went to Central Park and I saw a Black woman reading a book, and I said, this woman wrote that book. So, I mean, that's the thing about not knowing, right? You don't know what you don't know. I did not know that having a gift for writing, I could make use of it. I didn't know that.
Wow. Do you think that if you had joined an MFA program that your family would have been supportive, or would they have also raised their eyebrows at
I think they would have been confused, like what, because no, I mean, what do you mean you're going to be a writer? Even now, what do you mean you're a writer? I mean, no, now it's better because at least, a lot of my mother understands what I mean by being a writer. But no, it's just, it's not something where people do. I mean, where I come from, you come to America to become a lawyer, a doctor, an engineer, a pharmacist. You don't come to America to be a writer. So I think that also with my immigrant mentality, I'm not sure if I would have, even if I could, because I knew how risky it is. I would have known how risky it is. And being a young woman pretty much by myself in a strange country, I couldn't take the risk of doing something that I might end up not being able to pay my bills.
Right.
So,
right.
Because I mean, it is a part that comes with a lot of financial struggles if you don't, you cannot make enough money out of it. So there was, but I do think that I could have benefited if I had taken some writing classes earlier, if I had, had some guidance, a mentor to help me that along the way. That is why right now I take having mentors very seriously, even at this point in my life. And like I mentioned, the other writers who, I discuss with and I talk about, my career with, because I understand the importance of having guidance, the importance of people who can help you realize more of what you're trying to do or what kind of path you're trying to take. Because it's very hard when you even though I have written one book and I have another book coming out, there's still a lot that I don't know. So I do think that it's very important to have some sort of counseling or guidance or mentorship at any point in your career.
Right. On that note, do you think that you can tell us a little bit about the book that I peeked on Amazon and I saw that really striking cover of
yes.
the book. Can you just give us a sneak preview, a few clues?
Yeah, it is a story about what happens when a small African village decides to fight against an American oil company that is polluting their land. So it is about people, deciding that they do have the power to stand up against, corporations and governments, and also the cost, the price they have to pay to stand up against these powerful forces. At the heart of the story is a young girl whose family is at the center of this struggle. It's a struggle that lasts for many, many years, this village versus this corporation. And at the center of it is a young girl who grows up to become a sort of revolutionary. And the story is told by the girl's family and also a group of children growing up in this village that has been polluted. So it follows many generations of children as they try to fight and bring this corporation to justice.
Wow! I can't wait. When is that coming out?
March of next year.
Okay, everyone, pre-order on Amazon. Get your copy right away. Now I'm going to return to the audience I have been neglecting. Jamie Lynn Taylor, current student, 21, who just happens to be my Donnie. She asks, coming from a Black culture that idolizes America, how does your identity as an African immigrant affect the way you see African American experience in America? And I think that's a great question. One of the questions I also had about that relationship between African immigrant and African American.
Right. Well, so I'll start by when I was growing up in Cameroon. When I first saw African Americans, right, on television or when they came to our town, I will confess that I didn't really think that there was much of a connection between African immigrants and Africans in Africa and African Americans, because we mostly saw African Americans as being, Americans. It was mostly the American side that we emphasized. So there wasn't any difference to us between a white American or a Black American. They were all Americans to me. They were all foreigners. And so I came here with that mentality. That is why I was very, very naive on racism, because it just, we didn't exactly see that. We saw, we saw shows like The Cosby Show, which obviously you guys saw in America. Also, we saw The Cosby Show, we saw The Fresh Prince of Bel-Air, and perhaps those shows address racism, but what we saw was Black people living lives similar to the lives white people lived. So African Americans were nothing, were not like us. They were Americans, were like white people. It was only when I came here that I started realizing that there was such a thing as racism. um, and and the one thing that struck me and which saddens me now is there was just this sense amongst the African immigrants I met that, you know, that we don't really associate with African Americans because we, you know, they're different from us. Um, and, and I didn't quite understand why. And I later came to see that it's because there was this sense that like we're just too different, you know, they're from here, they have different culture, different experiences, they're nothing like us. But so college is what really made me start to realize that, because in college I had African American friends, and I started to realize what slavery did, and what the price we each paid, whether we stayed in Africa, whether we came here, the price we each paid. And recently, a few years ago, I went back to my town. I went back to my hometown for a visit, and I was I went to my ancestral village, which is right on the ocean. And I was standing standing by the ocean, looking out at the ocean. One of my relatives said that right here where we're standing, this is where the slaves passed on the way to America. And that was the first time that I realized that the slaves had passed through my village. And it made me wonder if my ancestors had played a role in the slave trade.
Wow.
And if they had not only played a role, but if they were the ones either selling or just standing by and doing nothing.
Mm-hmm. Wow, that must have been such a profound moment for you.
Oh yes, it was very profound. It really affected me, and for many years I was very haunted. I mean, by a sense of grief, you know, that, you know, if they passed through my village, it means that they didn't take people from my village, right? Because they stayed there, which means that somehow, and I don't have any evidence, I don't know what happened, but I imagine that, you know, they probably did nothing, or maybe because they lived on the coast, they were somewhat involved. The idea that they had passed right through my village really made me realize how the fact that we were the ones who were spared to stay there, how we were the privileged ones, and how my friends whose ancestors passed through the village, how they ended up suffering all the injustices that they're still suffering to today.
Wow. Well, after this, let's talk about book number 3 for you. Oh my goodness. This question is from, and I'm trying to go in order here, from Ivory Butler, who is a current student, class of 21. Spoiler alert, it says here, was the overdose at the end of the book an accident, or did she want to take her own life? Oh, that. Are you going to actually tell us? Never ask the author to explain. But okay, author, do you want to take that on?
I imagine it was an accident. I would think it was an accident. I at least that's what I thought she did, and that's what I think I wrote. But maybe it's not clear. In which case, I am sorry if it's not clear. But it was not. She didn't mean to take her life. She loved her children. She was deeply unhappy, but she would not have taken her life. She would have lived for her children. I think it was a situation where she was going through a hard time, and she was depending on, on substances to keep her up, and she just had a really, really deadly accident.
Yeah. Thank you for answering this. This is from Sifiso. I'm sorry, I don't have my glasses on. Mabena, sorry, class of 18. Could you speak about the biblical imagery and the parallels you drew between Egypt and America?
Yeah. So I had a religious upbringing, which is why, the epigraph is biblical, and there's a lot of biblical references, which is probably you'll find in my next book also, because once you have a religious upbringing, it's kind of hard to escape it. But yeah, I think that this I think the idea of the promised land is, goes throughout the book. I mean, the epigraph is from Deuteronomy, where, I believe it's Moses is telling, the children of Israel, God is going to take you into a land flowing with milk and honey, and there's this great hope that, once you get into this land, everything will be better. But I think that the mention of Egypt was, again, I don't remember specifically because I haven't read this book in a while, but I think that the mention of Egypt had to do with gender somewhat feeling as if it was in bondage. Am I correct? I don't remember. Do you remember the passage about what they refer?
I'm ashamed to say I don't. Maybe we can get some more information about that. Again, I think it's amazing that you can remember.
I know. I feel so bad because I sometimes forget. I sometimes forget the characters of the book. I'm like, what is this person's name? I was doing an event, and I was in an event in Canada, and I was saying, oh, there was a housekeeper to Cindy Edwards, and I was like, oh God, I don't remember her name, and the audience goes, Anna. I was like, okay. Because they all remember her name was Anna. Of course, I forgot her name. So I am sorry. You know, it's just, I don't read the book. I haven't read it in a long time. So I remember the key points, but I sometimes forget pieces of it.
You are forgiven. You are forgiven. Okay, this question is from Joan Golan. Did you know that when you began writing the book that Jende would be returning to Cameroon? Or did you think he might find a way to become an American citizen?
I did not start writing it with the ending in mind. I started writing in the beginning, and then I got to the end, and I said, "Oh, he's going home. I guess that's that." But I did not. It just when I got to the end, that was the realistic end. You know, it wasn't. Mm-hmm. I didn't start writing the story. Say, let me write a story that gets to this ending. That's not how I write. And it was a difficult ending for me because I had connected with Jende and his family, and I really, really rooted for them. I really rooted for them to achieve the American dream. And it was very hard, you know, to write it and to see that in a way they failed, and not especially for his wife, because, you know, his wife would really, really believe in the American dream. I mean, at some point, Jende lost his faith in the American dream, but I don't think Nanny ever wavered, and for good reason. You know, you said earlier that this book, The American Dream, takes a beating, but to me, this book is also very much a love song to America.
Yeah, yeah. And I also think it's interesting that Jende and Nene have different experiences of their fathers, mm-hmm. Which could contribute to that as well. You mm-hmm. know, it seems as if after Jende's father passed away, that was such a traumatic event for him that he, that taken with everything else,
right,
started to turn his gaze back towards home.
Right.
Because
right.
his wife was like, no, New York, New York,
right.
New York.
Right. Yeah.
That was also really interesting detail in the book.
Yeah, because I think it was very, I think that is when he really realized how much he had lost everything for the sake of the American dream. You know, the fact that he given so much, he'd come here, he'd worked so hard. He had, you know, his wife was, his marriage was falling apart. His father died. He'd not been able to bury his father. Then he still has so much responsibility that he's having a hard time meeting. I think it all made him realize, is this really worth it? You know, and it is, you know, it is a question that, you know, we have to ask ourselves, right? You know, when you're pursuing a dream. I mean, this novel is very much about dreams, about the pursuit of dreams, but it is also very much about failure. Mm-hmm. And I mean, I mentioned my failures. You know, I could write a book on failures because I have failed quite a bit. But it is a story about the fact that as much as we like to tell kids that, oh, your dreams will come true, some dreams don't come true. You know, it's not a very American thing to say, but some dreams don't come true. And I am at peace writing about them, at peace accepting that.
Mm-hmm. Right. Yeah. Thank you. Our next question comes from Meryl Rosen, class of '82. Secrets and lies seem to be an underlying theme that adds to the complexity and nuance of so many characters in the book. Do these flaws intentionally make your characters more human, the secrets and lies?
I suppose you could say that. I mean, you know, it is, you know, it's part of the human condition, right? To, you know, to say what you need to say to get by or to escape a situation. And I mean, one of the biggest, you know, lies at the center of the book is Lehman Brothers, right? You know, this bank that on the surface was powerful and strong and employed so many people and nobody thought it was going to fall apart. But that was one of the secrets and lies that, in effect, led to everything happening. I mean, the collapse of Lehman Brothers is what set the stage for so much in this novel.
Yeah.
And I think that it is also, to me, it's somewhat of a metaphor for America also, the lies we tell ourselves about this country and about ourselves. And for better or for worse, I think Gender believes some of those lies, and maybe that is why he's angry at himself, because he was so naive about America, and I don't blame him. I was naive about America too. That doesn't mean that I don't think it's a wonderful country. That there's so much about this country that I was very uneducated about until I got here. But I think I kind of wised up a lot faster than Gender. I think I had, but I also went to college, so I had an advantage of going to college and being able to study and to learn, and thank God for college, because Gender did not go to college. So there's a lot of that he didn't learn about the realities of life in America.
I think that you get across that idea of secret of lies so beautifully when you describe Mr. Edwards' phone calls, that he never really has a complete conversation. It's sort of these gaps,
Right.
and I immediately think of Toni Morrison putting these gaps in her language. You do that so well, and sometimes it sounds like a normal conversation, but a lot of times it sounds like something important is happening.
Right.
And they has no connection to it because it's called this kind of Morse code that he can't decipher.
Right.
Really well done.
Yeah. Thank you. I mean, it was because I was very fascinated, by what happened at Lehman Brothers. Because I lost my job after Lehman Brothers collapsed and the economic crisis came, and I pretty much lost my job because of that. So I had this fascination about what happened there, and there was a lot we didn't know, right, until it was later exposed. So I suppose I couldn't help myself, but to put this bank. And I think for the students starting this year, this Lehman Brothers sounds like something that happened like 1 million years ago, because they're probably young children. The Lehman Brothers collapse was a very, very, very major event in America, and it shaped a lot of things after. And this story is very much about those kind of lies, the lies told by corporations, and how the innocents, all pay the price for those lies.
Yeah.
But it is also about individual lies. I mean, there is, nannies, dreams of going back home and putting up a facade. Cindy puts up a facade, and so does Gender and Clark, and so it is. I think these characters are all working towards the same thing, the achievement of their dreams, and the lies are just part of that. And so what I wanted to explore in this novel is the price of dreams. There is a huge price to be paid for dreams, not just any dream, but in this particular novel, the American dream. And we can see that, that dream comes at a very high price for all of these characters.
Right. Well, sometimes I think the secrets are actually, the secrets and lies are actually positive. For example, when Nene goes and finds this church and finds communion with Natasha, I think that that's a secret that she does keep from her husband until the end, at least. And but it's such a balm for her soul, for her troubled soul, right?
That's right.
So I think that there are definitely many uses of secrets and lies. Our wonderful Professor Bill Schullenberger asks, did you speculate about what Gender and Nene and their children's lives would be like in 5 years after they return?
The short answer is no, because when I finished writing the story, I said, okay, that's it for the story. And then the moment the book was published, I went out to do events. The first question I get was, what about the sequel? And I said, there's no sequel. That's it. I have nothing. That's the end of the story. I just, which is, I guess, it's a great privilege to have that question, because it means that, the people wanted to hear more, but I really I don't think much about it, because the story was about them up to that point. And sometimes I think I wonder whether they're happy, But I don't dwell too much on it because if I want to continue the story and write a sequel, it won't be for many, many years. And right now I have other stories I like to tell.
Okay, so afterwards we'll talk about book number 4. Okay. All right, next question is from Paige Delano. Hi, Paige, class of 71. Did you write letters home and did they help?
Yes, I wrote a lot of letters home. I miss letter writing. So when I came to America, which was the late 90s, people didn't have cell phones. I mean, my family house, we didn't have a house phone. I remember when I wanted to talk to my mother, I had to call the neighbor and say, can you please tell my mother I'm going to call on so and so day and time, and then my mother will be there, and that's when I'll hear her voice. But letters were the best ways, and I received a lot of letters, and it was so wonderful in college to open my mailbox and see a birthday card from my mother all the way from my country. Yeah, I don't get it now. Now I get a phone call or maybe a text. Not quite the same. Yeah.
Okay, all right, thank you. This is a question from a parent of the class of 24 who says, "Love the book!" with exclamation mark. One of the characters that challenged me the most was Vince. I think I understand the contrast between him and Mighty and how that was particularly hard on Cindy. What additional aspect of life were you trying to show with Vince's story?
You know, I never met anybody like Vince until I went to Columbia for graduate school. You know, because I didn't grow up around people like Vince. I mean, obviously I didn't grow up around in America, but I also didn't go to college with people like Vince, because when I went to college, I went to a public school, to Rutgers in New Jersey, and most of my friends came from working class background. So I didn't really meet wealthy people until I moved to New York City, and I went to Columbia, and I met these young men and women whose parents had so much money, and you know, and they had so much privilege, and yet they almost had this anger towards the injustices that were going on because of their privileges, and they wanted to change the system. And I was really fascinated by the Vinces of the world. So I decided to think about him as a character. But you know, there is, I think what drew me to that character was also the relationship with his mother and his parents in general, how they worked so hard to give him this privilege, and now he's somewhat like throwing it back in their faces because he resents the fact they are so focused on money and material things, and he's about being spiritual and being free and moving to India and you know, not getting caught up in American consumerism. And the irony of it all, right, that he got the privilege to be able to just drop out of law school and move to India because of the privileges that he's actually trying to like, you know, distance himself from. But I do like that character. I love young people like Vince. I love people with zeal and passion and people who want to overthrow the system. I just think that it's fascinating that somebody who had so much privilege would try to distance themselves, because I never had that kind of privilege. I wonder what it's like to grow up, you know, to be born into all that, and yet to not want to have a part of it because you think that there's so much injustice caused by people like your parents.
Right. Yeah. And you know, quite honestly, you do. One of the things I wondered about Vince was, you know, how much he was objectifying this experience in India.
Right.
You know,
Right.
that you had to go to a specific place to be spiritual. You know, which seems to be a contradiction in some ways.
Right.
But the next question is actually another very deep question. When Nene blackmailed Cindy, it was shocking. Can you speak to that?
Oh yes, that scene. So I will say that I wrote that scene from Cindy's point of view first. So this whole novel, I first wrote it from 4 points of view. I wrote it from Jende and Nene and Clark and Cindy's point of view, and then over the course of the writing, I ended up just changing it to just Jende and Nene's points of view. So I wrote that scene from Cindy's point of view. And I really felt for Cindy having this woman, you know, her former housekeeper, working and blackmail her. But then when I read it, I got it from Nanny's point of view. I got to also understand where Nanny was coming from, in the sense that I think she thought herself entitled also, because she was also looking out for her family, and she felt as if Cindy had used her for the interest of her own family. So it was mother versus mother, woman versus woman. Everybody wanted to take care of their own children, take care of their own families, and while what Nanny did, of course, I don't agree with it. I can empathize with what she was trying to do, because she didn't go there to blackmail Cindy. She went there to say, help me. But if you won't help me, I'm going to have to do this, the rough way. So, I have been asked a lot about if that is out of character for Nanny, because, at this point in the story, people really like Nanny. She's hardworking, she's sweet, she's really great character, and then she blackmails. And when people say that, I say, have you ever done something that surprised you? Have you ever shocked yourself? Have you said, I can't believe I did that? We all do, maybe not to the level of blackmail, but we all do things that, we go out of ourselves, and we shocked our friends and family by making decision or doing something really rash. And I think that's what happened to Nanny there. She was very determined to achieve the American dream. She was very determined to take care of her family, to stay in America, to find a way to go to school. She wanted to go to school, and she had this one chance, and she basically, took a huge gamble by walking into this woman's house and demanding money.
Right. Yeah, no, it was shocking. Yeah, it was a really complex scene. I could see that was for you a very complex scene to kind of carry out in the book. Carlos of Class of '03 asks, of all the characters, Clark and Jenda seem to grow the most, but I would love your perspective on this. Do you think that they grow the most in the book?
There was somebody who said that they do grow the most on the backs of the women. So the men,
yes,
the men,
say thumbs up here. Yes.
Yeah, because the women pay the price, right? I mean, Jenda was able to achieve his dream and go back to Cameroon with money because of what Nanny did. Clark ends up becoming, father of the year because, Cindy suffered to hold the family together.
Right.
So it is, I do have a certain soft spot for Clark and Jenda, because when I started writing the story, it was about the two of them. It was about these two men, a man and a chauffeur, and the women came later. So the women were not in the story until many writes later. But I do think that they grew a lot. I also think that, they are privileged by virtue of being men. I mean, to the same point, and I agree with that point, but the women also suffer the most by virtue of being women, by virtue of being the ones to make the most sacrifices. I mean, Cindy made the ultimate sacrifice, but, Nanny, I mean, the loss of her dreams, people say to me, Nanny could have become somebody in America. She could have achieved many things, and I do agree, she could have, but, she was a woman, and a married woman, a woman with children, so that happened.
Right, and that was quite believable. Yeah, how are you doing? Can I ask?
I'm good. Yes. Thank you.
I haven't heard any children in the background. Very good. Let's see. Gabrielle, who's an MFA student, 06, asks, I noticed there's a little internal reflection from the characters, especially as their life events get increasingly dramatic and dark. Was this an intentional choice on your part, or just how you naturally told your story? I also want to mention that I've taught your book for several semesters at 2 California community colleges.
Yay, thank you.
Up with students who are often immigrant and first-generation college students. They love it.
Oh, thank you.
Do you sense that there is, that the characters don't really have much internal reflection when they are, as their life events get bigger and more complicated?
I can't say that, because I'm not sure what I did. I mean, is it because it's heavier on dialogue or less on dialogue as the story moves forward? I really don't remember. But no, I mean, what I did was just trying to present everything to the reader as clearly as possible. So if I had to use, internal monologue, that's what I did. If I had to use dialogue, that's what I did. So it wasn't any attempt to say, let me do this to show this or that. It was just what, basically, whichever way the story went, that's just how I write.
Yeah. And I also think that, especially in Nene's case, as I was reading her, she became quieter and quieter towards the end of the novel, almost to the point of not even having a voice. And
well, because she lost. I mean, she'd given up by then. She'd been broken. I mean, she'd been basically physically, mentally, emotionally beaten down. And I mean, that's why she didn't seem to have a voice, because when the story ends, she is that woman at the beginning of the story who was full of life and excitement for life, is basically, being crushed.
Exactly. I couldn't put it better. Amanda asks our dean, one of our deans, what is the story behind Mighty's name?
Oh, yes, there is no story behind Mighty's name. I was thinking about what somebody like Cindy Edwards would name their child, and I thought about how, Cindy Edwards is, she's a very, the kind of woman who would give her child one of those Hollywood names, how Hollywood people, they name their children Apple or Pumpkin or Banana, and Mighty just seemed like one of those names. But I didn't even think about it, but I get that question a lot. I don't know. I mean, I thought it was a cool name.
Yeah, I thought it was a great name. I loved it. I might actually steal it. So that was a wonderful name. Okay, next question, second to last question, from our own Peter Van Dyke from class of '82. I love that the book ends on a question mark. What might the experience be like as essentially an immigrant in her own country?
Can you please repeat the question?
What might the experience be like, I guess, for Nene as essentially an
oh, I see, right. Oh, wow, that's a good point, because she is somewhat, she was such a New Yorker, now she's going back to this place where she's going to be somewhat of a foreigner. Yeah, I think it's going to be hard for her, because it's not only being an immigrant, but also having returned to where she dreamt of escaping, you know, because New York to her was freedom. America to her was a chance to become everything that she couldn't be, and now it is a sort of admission that you're never going to be anything but just this woman living in this little town. And by the way, Limbe, which is my hometown, is a wonderful town, but it is not a town for people who have big dreams like Nene. It's unlikely she's going to become a pharmacist there. It's unlikely she's going to have any kind of career there. She's going to have a nice house and maybe have a housekeeper, but Nene does not want to sit at home and have a housekeeper clean her house. She wants to go out there. So, and the question of the point about the question mark is a good one, because the book ends home ? And I think that without realizing it, I was writing a story about home also, because I left home at an early age, and for a very long time I was in pursuit of a new home. I was very desperate to be at home somewhere. I mean, when I first came to America, I cried my eyes out. I said, take me back home. I don't want to be here. I was just very unhappy. And so I spent so many years wanting to feel at home. And so even without realizing it, it was only after I read the book, people said to me that this book is very much about home. And I realized that it's because I spent so many years searching for home, or always saying, is this my home? Where can I be at home? And now, of course, my hometown is not quite home the way it used to be, because I've been here for so many years, and
So what would the experience be for the baby, for the little girl?
Well, I imagine it'll be easier for her because she's a baby. It would be harder. Probably Nanny will have the hardest experience, but but for the son also, because he also, go to America. Yeah, it's I think it's very hard, because it's I mean, even though it's your hometown, it's you're no longer as familiar with the ways of life there. So you are, to the point, you are somewhat of an immigrant again.
Right. Well, I thought it was interesting that Jende it definitely seemed that, you know, there were possibilities for him, but not so much for his wife.
That's
it
right.
seemed like, you know, coming home was, you know, that was really kind of the end, you know.
Yes.
So this is the last question from Carlos, class of '03. Do you have any recommendations for additional reading this year? What are you reading that we should be reading?
Oh boy, what did I just read? Oh, well, actually, I don't know what I should recommend. What I just read. Actually, it was a wonderful book, but wonderful book. I just read a book that came out years ago called Station 11.
Yes.
I love that book. And I didn't know it was about a post-pandemic apocalyptic world. I picked it up because I heard about it, and I said, oh no, this is too real. But I loved it. And if you want to read a book that, you know, it's a different kind of home, right? Because, you know, all of humanity loses their home. I think it's a brilliant read for now. It's very different from my book, but it is. I am a fan of great literature, no matter what the subject matter is, and that is great literature.
Okay, all right, yeah, Station 11, Emily St. John Mandel, for everyone who's looking at wonderful book. Imbolo, I'm going to pass you to Crystal, but I want to thank you for this conversation.
Thank you, Carolyn.
Brilliant. Loved hearing. I could talk to you for another 2 hours. I think your children will be just climbing in other rooms, and you don't want to see what's happening. But thank you so much for your generosity, your wonderful answers, and letting us have another window into this marvelous book. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Carolyn.
And I want to thank you all for joining us. Thank you, Carolyn, for being such a wonderful interlocutor. Thank you, Fatia, for helping arrange this evening. And thank you especially, Imbolo, for gracing us with your presence, and especially in the ways that you were just speaking about home. There's a way for everyone who is on this Zoom that Sarah Lawrence is part of home for us, home that's away, home that's distant, home that's current, and also for bringing us into so many of our current issues through the way that we have, you have talked with us and we have read with you about your experience through the eyes of Jende and Nani, about immigration, about issues of race, about issues of social class. In June, at the beginning of June, we gathered as a campus, June 5th, to really have a day of reflection on where we are as a country. And so to help us in the way that you have now, to pick up that conversation as we begin this academic year, we are just incredibly grateful for you helping us do that, helping us mark the start of this very unusual academic year. We have some of our students on campus, we have some of our students near campus, we have some of our students around the world, and we have the Sarah Lawrence community all together. And so thank you for helping make this be a special evening for us. I want to give a big shout out to Christina Camardella in our Alumni Affairs Office for all of the background work that she has done. It's nice she turned her camera on to receive this thanks. And Cheryl Cipro, who has navigated all of your chat, because I know what it's like to be on the other end of a Sarah Lawrence chat, and I can tell you that can be challenging and complicated. And we have lots more programming to come this year, lots that's already going on. So thank you for helping us launch the series on justice. Thank you for being with us tonight. And thank you for being the Sarah Lawrence community who reads and reads together.